The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are definitely going to go down as two of the greatest games of all time. But when it comes to my double review format that I have used in the past, unfortunately I found that it doesn't really work for these two games. Despite the fact that I have tried my hardest to try and do a review of Breath of the Wild and then a review of Tears of the Kingdom, it just doesn't work. In fact, I recorded an entire 23-minute video and then scrapped the entire thing just because it didn't feel right. So unlike my other double reviews, this time I'm going to be comparing the two games. And at the end, we will decide both on scores and also which one is better. So let's begin. The combat of these games is without a doubt similar, and I think that the main thing that puts Tears of the Kingdom ahead of Breath of the Wild, since the fighting is pretty much the same in both of these games, is the fuse abilities. And while I don't really like the concept of decayed weapons, which kind of ruins fuse in a way, it does create some interesting scenarios with Zonai equipment. But I think that the main thing that gives this one to Tears of the Kingdom is the enemy variety within that game. The introduction of Horoblins, Gleeoks, and so many other creatures just make this world feel more, I don't want to say real, but there's just a lot more enemy variety, which is definitely appreciated. So yeah, this one goes to Tears of the Kingdom. Okay, so this is probably the least comparable category between the two games, but I'll try my best. Traversing through the map in Breath of the Wild feels almost seamless, because you can get through everything just through some sort of solution. Whether it's climbing and possibly using Revali's Gale, or crossing a river using Krynosis, it's clear that there's always a way to get around everything. But in Tears of the Kingdom, well, this is still technically true. The game is a little bit more linear in its design, which it's still open world, and I know that that's weird to say, but those who've played it, it does kind of make sense, and I'm not sure how else to explain it. But Traversal in Tears of the Kingdom feels more like a hassle sometimes. Instead of just activating a rune, now I have to build my own boat just to be able to cross the river, or have to find some sort of mountain to climb up and then just glide over it. And well, yes, it leads to more creativity. I don't know, I think I just preferred the simplicity of Breath of the Wild, and how you could just get out the Master Cycle at any time so long as you beat the DLC. Just everything felt just a little bit easier. Also, not to mention the fact that they updated climbing within Tears of the Kingdom, and it's not as good as in Breath of the Wild. And while Tulin's ability is really cool, I still think I prefer Revali's Gale. So, traversal-wise, yeah, I think I'm gonna go with Breath of the Wild on this one. Maybe a bit of a hot take, but I guess we'll see. So obviously this one is going to go to Tears of the Kingdom, with the different uses of the Ultra Hand, Ascend, Rewind, and well, I don't really like it as much, Fuse, and even a later rune that you get, not going to spoil. Breath of the Wild's runes just aren't on the same level. While I do miss having Cryonis as well as remote bombs, it's really not too big of a deal, especially compared to all of the different things that you could do with the runes in Tears of the Kingdom. So yeah, this one is going to Tears of the Kingdom. Music-wise, it's kind of difficult to choose between both of these games, because the Tears of the Kingdom OST is fantastic, but unlike Breath of the Wild, we haven't been listening to it for the past 6 years, and people are still trying to figure out which songs are which and making their full OST uploads. But from my experiences playing both of these games, I have to go with Tears of the Kingdom here. Just the sheer velocity that I felt during the Colgera boss fight just made me feel just amazing, and no piece in Breath of the Wild even came close to that. In fact, just listen to this. So yeah, I think Tears of the Kingdom is going to win this one for me. Now, call me crazy, but for whatever reason, I don't want to immediately give this point to Tears of the Kingdom. And maybe it's because I feel like Breath of the Wild, in terms of its sense of exploration, just does a little bit better of a job. Obviously, there's way more to explore in Tears of the Kingdom. However, the Sky Islands are, at least in my opinion, extremely lame. The depths just never really grab my attention, but are definitely more interesting. And I mean, the land of Hyrule you've already explored in the last game. And I feel like I'm definitely not the only person who feels like Hyrule is still the most interesting part to explore in Tears of the Kingdom. I mean, we've already been introduced to it, and the game even expects you to have played Breath of the Wild previously, in the way that it sets up new things to do within Hyrule. And while obviously these new things to do are still really cool, especially in places like Lurelin Village and the Hateno Village with the election, it's just strange to me, because I felt like originally this would right away go to Tears of the Kingdom, but honestly, I think I'm gonna have to go with Breath of the Wild here. So here's the thing, replayability is kind of hard to determine between these two games, especially given that, again, it's the same map of Hyrule. And while originally I felt like Breath of the Wild was the most replayable game of all time, it's hard for me to go back to it now that we have Tears of the Kingdom. But I feel like Breath of the Wild, just within its own nature, feels better suited for going up and playing through it all again. The story feels like something you can just repeat over and over again, and it's fine. Tears of the Kingdom just kind of felt like a one-time experience within its story, at least for me. And while there probably is more to do within Tears of the Kingdom, I don't know, maybe it's just the DLC, but for now, I think I'm gonna side with Breath of the Wild on this one. But this probably could change in the future, we'll see. Alright, I don't know how many people I'm going to be upsetting by saying this, but the Tears of the Kingdom shrines are so lame. The shrines in this game are incredibly short, and while some of them are very creative, there are so many different ways that you can cheese them that it just doesn't really feel worth it in the end. The Breath of the Wild shrines are by no means perfect, but they feel much more satisfying to be able to defeat. And in turn, the shrine quests were just more satisfying in general in Breath of the Wild as well. Having to move a crystal to a certain location isn't really as fun as some of the different and creative shrine quests that Breath of the Wild had. The blessings just made a lot more sense in Breath of the Wild, whereas in Tears of the Kingdom, it kind of gives you blessings for things that I don't really feel like I deserve just getting a random orb of light for. So yeah, I would say Breath of the Wild definitely takes the cake when it comes to the shrines. The puzzles just are better in general, and like I said, they're longer and more satisfying. And with the combat challenges, I do think Tears of the Kingdom is a little bit better because it's not as repetitive, but just in general, I think Breath of the Wild has to win this category. So, oddly enough, while I prefer the shrines in Breath of the Wild, the dungeons in Tears of the Kingdom are a million times better, because they feel once again like Zelda dungeons, just with its own open world exploration style twist on them. All of the dungeons in this game are so much fun, and while I didn't really like the 5th dungeon, the Contract Factory, as much as the other 4, it was still pretty cool, and this also goes for just so much of the design. The puzzles are satisfying, and how they use each sage's ability, it's just so cool. Like, I don't really know how else to describe it. It takes a style that kind of worked for dungeons in Breath of the Wild and perfects it, and even puts it into something that feels more like a Zelda game. It works just unbelievably well. This one 100% goes to Tears of the Kingdom. So for obvious reasons, both the art style in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are very similar. And while I really do like the Breath of the Wild art style, and especially its use of colors like blue, orange, and purple to symbolize just different things within the ancient world, I have to say, especially with the sky, the Tears of the Kingdom art style is just beautiful. And this is especially with how it uses the color red. It's done so well to represent either the Demon King or something truly evil, and it just works. So I have to go with Tears of the Kingdom here. Time and time again in this series, I have repeated how important innovation is in making a Zelda game a Zelda game. And while both of these games are almost equally as innovative, it's hard to deny just how much Breath of the Wild impacted the open world genre. And well, no doubt, Tears of the Kingdom will have its own impacts. I still think that the original holds more innovation and how much it changed and went against the formula that Zelda already had. And while Tears of the Kingdom does so much with the runes and everything around that, I think we can say clearly that Breath of the Wild takes this one. So I promised a warning, and here it is. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. Everything from this point on is just going to be spoilers for both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, so here we go. One of the most hated things about Breath of the Wild had to be the final boss fight. So many people called it too easy and just plain lame. And honestly, I didn't think it was that bad, but I can get where people were coming from. And luckily, the Tears of the Kingdom final boss fight is much better. Ganondorf feels just more proper as a final boss, I guess. And this definitely works well in the first phase, but I feel like as the Demon King, he doesn't really feel that much more powerful, to me at least. I mean, yeah, he has more health points, but he just kind of does the same attacks, and you can't really understand why no one was able to beat him so many years ago. He just still feels like Ganondorf. And I get that that's what the Secret Stone does, but I don't know, I just found it to be a little bit odd. And then the final sequence, when Ganondorf transforms him into a dragon, story-wise, I think is kind of dumb, but as a final boss fight, works very well. And just in general, the boss fights within Tears of the Kingdom are much more creative than they are in Breath of the Wild. And I love that we have original bosses rather than just blights of Ganon. Honestly, this category has to 100% go to Tears of the Kingdom. So yeah, this is another really easy one for Tears of the Kingdom. Without a doubt, people hate the Breath of the Wild story, and honestly, I don't think it's that bad. It's basically an advanced character study on Zelda, which is someone that we've never had that kind of a study on before, and there's an equal amount of cutscenes in Breath of the Wild as there is in Tears of the Kingdom. But the advantage that Tears of the Kingdom has is not only does it explore something that we haven't seen before in the first Kingdom of Hyrule, but it just has a more interesting villain that is better fleshed out throughout the entire story. And also the voice acting is so much better in Tears of the Kingdom. I just feel like the story works a lot better in Tears of the Kingdom, and maybe it's also the regional disasters plot, which works better than just the divine beast suddenly acting up. I think for me, Tears of the Kingdom just has to win this one, and I feel like most people are in agreement there. The cutscenes are interesting, and while I still don't think that this story is like perfect by any means, there have been better Zelda stories, this one just works the best, and the characters are really good as well. It just works. In my opinion, the most important part of a video game is the beginning and the ending. And oddly enough, these games have very comparable openings as well as endings. But first, let's talk about the opening tutorials and just the opening in general, because in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, they have very vastly different ways to show you this world. I highly recommend a video by Crazy Tendo going way more in depth than I'm going to in this video. But I don't really like the opening to Tears of the Kingdom, and part of this is not only because the tutorial takes forever, but the Great Sky Islands you aren't going to see anything like that in the rest of the game. It feels like it's setting up something that you're never going to see again, because Breath of the Wild's Great Plateau works, in my opinion, because it's just a small portion of the game's huge world, but has so many different activities and things to do in it. And I found the lack of enemy variety within the Great Sky Islands to also be pretty lame. There wasn't really any significant challenges, like the Blue Bokoblins or the Stone Talus within Breath of the Wild, and as a result, I don't know how I feel about this one. Also, while I like the concept of starting Link at max stamina and max hearts to try and get back to that, you don't really see the advantages when you're playing in the opening, and it just kind of has a reverse effect of me asking more questions and not really having all the answers as to why that's the case. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I feel like it doesn't really do what it's supposed to do, which is in cases like Metroid Prime, where they show you how powered up you are, and then when those are taken away, you want to get them back. And yeah, that's kind of a small thing, but to me at least, I don't know, I think I prefer the opening to Breath of the Wild. It had a little bit more mystery to it, and motivated you to try and figure out who the voice is, and eventually go and grab the paraglider. Yeah, I think I just prefer Breath of the Wild here. Now, equally as important to every video game is its conclusion, and I have seen plenty of video games where the ending is not very satisfying, and it kind of ruins the experience. However, I have seen just as many video games that kind of suck, but the ending is so good that it makes me think, oh, maybe that game wasn't all that bad. And luckily for us in Breath of the Wild, the ending, yeah, it isn't great. But I would argue that in Tears of the Kingdom, it isn't great either. Well, both of these have cinematic final boss fights in their final phase, which honestly I think is pretty cool. The ending cutscenes left me a little unsatisfied, and even the extra cutscenes that we get to see, I don't really know if I like them all that much. I really do like the ending line though to Breath of the Wild. It really sticks out to me. In Tears of the Kingdom, I mean, I just beat the game like a week ago, and I don't even remember anything that Zelda says at the end. And that's a bit of a problem. The "Do you remember me?" is such an iconic line to me, and honestly, I have to go with Breath of the Wild here. And honestly, the extra cutscenes in Tears of the Kingdom, I mean, it worked, but it felt way too long. And then in Breath of the Wild, I feel like they could have done more with it, but I thought it was cool how they were establishing that Zelda and Link were going to take to the future in building up Hyrule once more. So yeah, in my opinion, I think I have to go with Breath of the Wild here. I like the Tears of the Kingdom final boss phase more, but in terms of the actual ending to the game, the last thing that you see before credits, I just have to go with Breath of the Wild. So yeah, we have a tie, and honestly, that doesn't surprise me. These games feel so equal to me, which is why I'm going to give them the combined score of a 9 out of 10. And it's kind of weird to me because I kind of want to give both of these a 10 out of 10 just because of how much I enjoy them, but they almost work against each other in just how comparable they are. But that's just something I noticed. But in general, which do I prefer? The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild? Well, you're gonna have to watch my ranking every Zelda game video to find out. Bye!